I asked a bunch of people on Twitter to let me know if they had questions for you, right? And so there were some pretty fun questions I wanted to, ask you to see, what you think. One of the more interesting questions was whether or not you would run for office at any point.
Never.
Never. Why
No
is
desire.
that?
I don't believe in the system. I think it's so rigged and so beyond fucked. I don't see any point in participating in what I think is it's built on unfixable bullshit. I mean, unless there's some sort of a complete radical restructuring of how money is involved in politics and how what the influence that corporations have on politicians, I just don't see any point. I really don't. I don't think it can be fixed.
I don't know if you heard about a Democratic candidate in Georgia. She's a senatorial candidate by the name of Michelle Nunn. But the National Review got a hold of her campaign memo, and it kind of highlights exactly what she's supposed to do to win. And about 90%, 80 to 90% of her activities are based on fundraising. So what you're saying about campaign donations and corporate interests and corporate influence is absolutely right. And the crazy thing is, for her senatorial campaign, the goal was to raise somewhere between 18 to 20 million dollars. If you're going to be focused on raising money for your campaign, how are you going to represent your constituents? You're not, right? You're not. So I totally agree with you on that. But let's say something like Wolfpack, which is a political action committee by the Young Turks, which aims to take money out of politics. Let's say something like that actually is successful. We pass an amendment to the Constitution. All elections are publicly financed. Would you have any interest in running for public office? No. I'm a comedian. I'm a cage fighting commentator. I really, there's better people for sure. I also don't think that there should be a person that runs things. I don't agree with it. I think it's an antiquated system that's based on alpha male chimpanzee behavior. I really do. I think the idea of one guy, like a president, or one woman, one alpha that rules the whole, it's ridiculous. We have the internet now, and I honestly think that the internet is the best way to govern things. Right.
I think it just has to be figured out how people can have a say. Like, representative government is not necessary anymore. The idea of it being like you need a senator, you need a congressman, you need a representative of your state, I don't think that's necessary anymore. I don't like the idea of it. I think the idea of it was based on when it was impossible to communicate with people that were thousands of miles away. That's not the case anymore. Now you can have instantaneous communication with people all over the world. And I just think this idea of presidents and congressmen, and that's how we should dictate laws, and that's how we should figure out how to govern an ethical society, I think it's antiquated.
Interesting. So how would you govern a country like the United States if you don't have the system that we have set up? And by the way, I mean, to say that there's one person who calls the shots is a little unfair, because we do have a system of checks and balances. Of course, it has been corrupted by corporate interests, so these people who are supposed to represent us don't represent us. But let's say we do away with the judicial branch, Congress, the executive branch. Like, what would you preferably see in the U.S.?
You'd have to get some of the best minds in the world to sit down and restructure it and try to figure out a better way to do it, and do it from the ground up, and not do it based on the system that we already have in place, try to fix it. I think the system that we have in place is just, it's so crazy, it's so ridiculous that you would have to start from scratch, and you would have to figure out some sort of an ethical, honest way to handle everything. And I don't know. I'm not qualified. I'm not qualified to manage that. I'm not qualified to engineer that. But I think there's a way better way to do it than what we're doing now.
What I love about you is the fact that you're so real about who you are, right? I think people who are public figures have to pretend, or feel the need to pretend, as though they're the best at everything, they know everything, and they don't like to admit when they don't know something, right? And I feel like, through your podcast, you're really clear about things that you don't know about, and you want more information about it. And I think that intellectual curiosity is important, and that self-awareness is important. You don't pretend like you're a freaking superpower, and that's good. But the one thing that I do want to ask you about is, how do you kind of recreate a system when you have such severe political apathy in the country. So let's look at Los Angeles as a case study. Right now in Los Angeles, officials just voted to do like a cash lottery to incentivize voting, because voter turnout in LA specifically is so low. When it comes to local elections, only about 16% of people show up. 16% of Angelenos show up to the polls. So how do you change that? Why are people so politically apathetic?
I think they don't believe in it. I don't think they believe in the system. I think there's a lot of people that believe in exactly what we've been talking about, that the system is so corrupted and so manipulated that what's the point in showing up and wasting your time if all these political decisions are being essentially made by corporations? And I think there's a lot of validity to that. If your time is very valuable, if you have a family and you have a job that requires a tremendous amount of time, plus commuting, plus traffic, you're like, fuck this voting. It's all bullshit anyway. It's all being controlled by these giant corporations and special interest groups, and why should I waste my time?
Yeah.
And it's that exact apathy that allows the system to stay in place, ironically. I mean, that's what's really kind of screwy about it.
Yeah, and you had a movement like Occupy that was immediately discredited. You know, whether or not they had a very specific or focused goal, it didn't matter. I mean, I feel like the establishment was already set on tearing them apart and pretending as though they are completely illegitimate, when in reality they had some serious concerns, the majority of which centered around what you just mentioned right now, money in politics. That really has destroyed every single element of our so-called democracy.
Well, Occupy also highlighted how creepy the system really is, because there's been so many people that it's been proven that were a part of Occupy that were actually working for the government, whether they were working for the FBI or the CIA or the undercover this or undercover that. There was a bunch of people that are hanging out pretending to be hippies that were in fact, you know, agent provocateurs or what have you. That's the most ridiculous misuse of taxpayer money ever. I mean, if there's a real issue, if these people are actually doing something and you have to bring someone in undercover to stop some sort of a terrorist threat, that's one thing. But these are just FBI agents or whatever organization, agents that are just fucking around and trying to drum up illegal activity so they can arrest people.
I know, I think that was also indicative of a larger issue that we have in the country, which is elected officials, people in power, people who have authority that do not want political activism in the country, right? And I think that it's clear in the intimidating or intimidation that you experience through the NSA, spying on every single element of your life. It's evident in the way that they treated Occupy protesters. I think it's evident in the way that they treat Ferguson protesters. Protests and political activism is not meant to be convenient. It's not supposed to have a time limit. It's not supposed to be in a certain area at a certain time. It's supposed to rile people up. It's supposed to get people to think.